your host, Stanton.
Well, hello and welcome to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, and tonight pretty much is our season finale, or before we go into our annual hiatus until September. And you know what a perfect timing too, Alex. I mean, it's completely like it's a scorcher out there. It's humid. I mean, it seems to be only two seasons now, winter and summer.
Well, winter and construction anyway.
Yeah. Just a few notes here to get out there before we get to our I got to mention our guest tonight. I mean, it's an honor to have who we have tonight. We have what I guess a lot of people consider the godfather of ufology, Stanton Friedman. It's certainly an honor to have him on the show. If you want to have more information on his books, articles, and everything about him, visit his website at www.stantonfriedman.com. It's all lowercase. We will put it in the chat room. It's on the show page for those to check it out, and certainly do so. And once again, we will have the lines open for any questions that you may have for Stanton. The number is 914-803-4095, and we'll get you into asking that question. Once again, if you're listening to the show and you are in our live chat room, to be able to connect with us live in there, you need to have your own Blog Talk account. So please, it's free. It takes a few seconds just to sign up, and you can get a question in there for Stanton as well. A couple, Alex, you and I, pretty much know a friend of ours, Keith Age. Mm-hmm. Some of you out there may know as a rock and roll ghost hunter, who's, behind stuff like Spooked and, pretty much made Waverly Hill Sanitarium popular, put it on the map. He had been really sick. He just had surgery, and I'm happy to say he's recovering quite well. It's good to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully things will continue to work out there. So that's great news. But a sad loss. Dennis Hopper.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, after a terrible fight with cancer. It's unfortunate. A very classic actor to a lot of people. Easy Rider, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So many classic films that he starred in. Sad loss. I'm sure he will be remembered, though, obviously. You know what? We are going to take our short break here because we're not going to waste any time. We want to bring Stanton right in here. So hold tight. We'll be right back after our first break here with Stanton T. Friedman. Hello, and welcome back to Nocturnal Frequency Radio. And tonight, our season finale, second season finale here on Blog Talk Radio. You are listening to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, and tonight we have Stanton T. Friedman, who's with us tonight. For more about Stanton, please visit his website at www.stantonfriedman.com. It's all lowercase. And once again, we'll throw that in the chat room. If you have a question and you'd like to get that out to Stanton, if you'd like to call in, you can call us at 914-803-4095. Or once again, in the chat room, we will be taking questions. Type them in bold, all capitals, so we can notice that you have a question there for them. Once again, if you're a guest, please sign up for a Blog Talk account so you can fully interact in the live chat room. I guess, Alex, without any further ado, let's bring Stanton. Welcome, Stanton, to the show.
I'm glad to be on.
It's certainly an honor to have you with us. I've heard you obviously many times on several different shows, and obviously one of the larger shows being Coast to Coast. Did you want to give just a brief bio for those who may not know who you are?
Well, okay. I grew up in New Jersey and left. Spent 2 years at Rutgers University, and then left really to go to the University of Chicago, where I spent 3 years. Got bachelor's and master's in physics. Carl Sagan and I were classmates for 3 years. Carl never bragged about that, and so I'm bragging he was my classmate. And then we went different paths. I went industry. I spent 14 years working on a wide variety of very exciting, very intriguing, eventually canceled, classified, advanced nuclear and space system development programs. I worked on for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department in Cincinnati. It was a big program. I mentioned this, somebody once wrote on Wikipedia that I only worked on paper studies, and in 1958, when I was working there, we employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists, and we spent $100 million that year. And back then, $100 million was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we did actually operate jet engines on nuclear power. Then I went to Aerojet General Nucleonics in California and worked on compact nuclear reactors for space vehicles, also for portable ones for the military, and also, most exciting, was working on fusion-powered rockets. That was a paper study, $9 million worth, but and it's intriguing how many people don't seem to understand. They think we're stuck with chemical rockets, and yet fusion is the main source of energy in the universe. That's how the stars work. That's where their energy comes from. They're not burning gas. It's nuclear fusion. And with the right stuff in the right way, you can kick particles out the back end that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. 10 million times. And, it says something about Earthlings, I guess, and I consider myself an Earthling. I hope, well, pretty much everybody listening is probably an Earthling, too. I'm not guaranteeing that. But, we didn't figure out how the stars work until 1938. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, they were working for 13 billion years altogether before that, but we figured it out in 1938. And the first thing we did with that was useful, I guess is the word. We built a fusion bomb, an H-bomb, which we exploded in 1952. It produced as much energy as exploding 10 million tons of TNT. A 3-mile-wide fireball. As a matter of fact, there's a picture of that in my new book, which just came out last week. Science was wrong a lot of times. But anyway, that was 10 million tons of TNT. The Russians tested one that was 50 million tons of TNT. And I can still remember when a big bomb during World War II was a 10-ton blockbuster, it was called. So, boy, have we made progress. In a 10-year period, we went from 10 tons to 10 million tons of TNT in one weapon. And then I worked on, that program got canceled also. Then I worked for General Motors in Indianapolis on compact nuclear reactors, military compact reactor program. And that program got canceled, and I worked for Westinghouse on nuclear fission rockets. There, at least, we tested things. It comes as a shock to people to find out that in 1968, we tested several different nuclear rocket engines on the ground. And the biggest one, Los Alamos, built less than 7 feet in diameter, 4,400 megawatts. That's twice the power level of Grand Coulee Dam, which is considerably bigger than 7 feet in diameter, to say the least. And that program got canceled too, of course. And then I walked in the door at McDonnell Douglas to try to figure out how UFOs worked, believe it or not. They had a far-out blue sky kind of program. The only trouble is the program that supported it, where the money came from, was canceled 2 weeks before I got there. So they kept me for 3 months. It was a beauty of a job, and it disappeared down the drain. And then I did work on something that worked, and that was used, the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft, TRW systems in California, and they used radioisotope thermoelectric generators. You know, using solar power is one thing, but the further you get from the sun, of course, the less solar power there is. And these things run for 30, 40, 50 years. They were kind of neat. It was a short-term program, but it was still kind of neat. Then I went full-time on UFOs, not traveling on them. It would have made travel a lot easier if I had my own. But and I gave my first lecture in 1967 in somebody's living room. And since then, over 700 lectures, usually with the title Flying Saucers Are Real. And I use this term flying saucers rather than UFOs because I'm interested in flying saucers. All flying saucers are UFOs. Very few UFOs are flying saucers. All great-grandfathers are men, but not all men are great-grandfathers. I am one, as a matter of fact. And so my focus is on those sightings which remain unexplained after investigation by competent investigators spending enough time, money, and effort to try to figure out what was observed. And now it's over 700 lectures in the 50 states, 9 provinces, and 16 other countries. My 5th book just came out last week, Science Was Wrong, but before that, and it's not all about flying saucers. Only 2 of the 14 chapters are. My co-author is Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's niece, and we first captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience in 2007. And then I did Flying Saucers in Science in 2008. And before that, even, I had done Top Secret Magic about Majestic 12 or Operation Majestic 12. Some documents, I think 4 out of about 200 are genuine and the rest are phonies. Those 4 are blockbusters. And before that, I was co-author on Crash at Corona, the definitive study of the Roswell incident. Corona's a small town, much closer to where one of the crashes occurred back in July 1947. I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. Notice I said civilian investigator. The military was investigating right away, and I was not there in 1947. But starting in about the mid-'70s and intensely in 1978, Roswell has been a big focus of my activities, and I will be there again this year. Anybody in the Southwest at the Roswell Festival, annual festival, July 1st through the 5th. In Roswell. There's another conference after that in Denver, Colorado. 2 weeks later, the 41st Annual Mutual UFO Network Symposium in Denver. I'll be there for that, too. So, anyway, I publish a regular column in UFO Magazine and in the MUFON Journal. I've been on Larry King 4 times. Get on Coast to Coast every once in a while. I expect I'll be on them this coming month because of the new book. It's kind of funny. Larry King, back about a month ago, had a program with Stephen Hawking and Dan Aykroyd and Seth Shostak of the SETI Institute and another astronomer. The only one who knew anything about aliens was Dan Aykroyd, believe it or not. I heard some really silly stuff from the others, and I have debated on Coast to Coast with Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute. And to me, SETI stands for a silly effort to investigate. And it was really strange listening to the discussion on the program, because one thing you never find is that the SETI people never talk about the evidence relating to aliens. There's Stephen Hawking saying, worrying that we shouldn't try to communicate with aliens because they're probably marauding around, and if they come here, you know what happened to the American Indians when Columbus came. Now, if you think about that despite the fact that I, as a physicist, certainly respect Stephen Hawking as a physicist, as a ufologist, he doesn't cut the mustard. Natives versus Columbus. These natives have weapons of mass destruction, lots of them. We have rocketry, we have radio, we have spies in the sky, and submarines that can go under the water around the planet without coming to the surface. We are far more sophisticated and far more dangerous. And if you were an alien, I think you'd worry very much about Earthlings going out there. And I like to remind people, because I'm an old guy and I remember it, that during World War II, we nice guys here, we natives, killed 50 million of our own kind. And we destroyed 1,700 cities. Anybody from outside would say, these guys are a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. Two numbers set up the contrast. One is that we have the problem with feeding our people. 30,000 children die every single day of preventable disease or starvation. And yet the military budget on this planet this year will be something over $1 trillion. That's 1,000 billion. Those two numbers don't make any sense together, do they? We could feed an awful lot of people for that money.
Yeah.
So, obviously nobody out there wants us to go out there. And we're a lot closer. One of the arguments I have to deal with all the time, and often from physicists, is you can't get here from there. And, it's a pretty silly argument. Sure you can't with a chemical rocket, but I can't get from Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I live, 73 miles east of Holton, Maine, out in the middle of nowhere, you might say. Can't get from there to, say, San Francisco on a bicycle in a very reasonable time. But if I go to the airport and catch an airplane, it's a 6-7 hour flight. So, no, you can't get here from there if you don't use the right device. But why would you restrict yourself to a bicycle? This is what these guys seem to be doing about going into outer space. And so, also, a strange argument. Now, I run across a lot of them, of course, because I do have questions and answers I provide the answers after my lectures. And one of them is, hey, how could an alien spacecraft come all the way across the vast distances of space and crash? Well, the crashes that I'm aware of, and there have been more than one, not just Roswell. There'll be a new book out, incidentally, about one in Aztec, New Mexico, in March of 1948 by Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, and they've done one heck of a bang-up job. I'll be writing the foreword for the book. I've seen most of it already. Great job. But none of the crashes that I'm aware of involve the motherships. The little ones that crash, say, 30 to 50 feet in diameter, 100 feet even, they're not the ones who came here from way out those vast distances. We have observations, lots of them, of huge motherships, let's say, half a mile to a mile long. That's pretty big. And we ourselves use motherships and little airplanes. The aircraft carriers that the Navy has these days, not 50 years ago, nuclear-powered ones can operate for 18 years without refueling. That's a long time.
Stan,
and they carry 75 airplanes that can only operate for an hour or two. They don't use the same systems, of course.
Let me ask you, how long do you think they've been observing us?
Well, I think they may even be protecting their assets more than they are observing us, but or protecting them from us. But I don't know. There's a fine book by Dr. Barry Downing called "The Bible and Flying Saucers," and he goes through. He has a bachelor's in physics and a doctorate of divinity, which is an unusual combination, to say the least. And he goes through the Old and New Testaments and finds plenty of sightings of what we'd call UFOs. They didn't use the term saucers because nobody had a saucer back then. They used mugs, you know. So thousands, millions of years, who knows? We again tend to forget the scaling factor here. Now, in 1650, Bishop Ussher said that, the world was created in 4004 BC. I think it was October 23rd at 6 p.m. So it isn't very old. Now we know that it's 4 billion and 4 would be a better number. And so there's civilization, just down the street from us. In my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, I talk about a star map that Betty saw and the work that went into trying to figure out what that means. And the base stars in the map turn out to be Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli. That's the constellation of Reticulum. You can't see it from here. You've got to go below the equator. They're only 39 light years away, those two stars. But they are 1 billion years older than the sun. Now look what we've done in the last 110 years. You know, where will technology be 1,000 years from now? No less than 1 million or 1 billion. It doesn't stay still. I mean, look at your computers. I was embarrassed, to say the least, when I spoke at the University of Detroit a couple of years ago, and I was talking about how many changes there have been in technology in my lifespan. And so when I started working in industry, I was using a slide rule. I looked around the class. There was no reaction at all. And I said, any of you know what a slide rule is? Not one person in that class did. And that was less than 50 years earlier. So the times, it's a device for multiplication and division and doing square roots and other things. You can buy for $5 in a cheap store. You can buy a calculator that can way outdo what the slide rule could. That would have been worth $1,000, 50 years ago. But the times change, and we have to allow for other beings to have changed. So what I'm leading up to is saying, as far as I can tell, there's no reason to say there haven't been past civilizations on this planet. What do we really know about what things were like 1 million years ago? I mean, okay, 100 million years we can say there were dinosaurs, maybe 150 million years. But who's to say there haven't been other civilizations before us that got wiped out by an asteroid, a nuclear war, other stuff? We are ignorant of what's gone on before. We're still finding remnants of the past when we go looking for them. So I think the aliens have been here for quite a while. I think it's standard practice once a civilization shows signs of being able to come out and bother them that they check us out. Look what we spend today on reconnaissance, spy satellites, radar, everything we can to make sure there's no surprise attack on us. Wouldn't aliens be doing the same thing? They would know that civilizations go through stages and get more advanced. Whether they're good guys or bad guys doesn't matter. We like to think we're the good guys, but our record doesn't say that. We did drop 2 atomic bombs on people after all.
So do you think that perhaps that they have more to worry than we do?
More to learn or worry?
Worry. Are they more? Do you think they're more threatened by us than we are of them?
Well, if they wanted to get rid of us, they could have done that a long time ago. We have a terrible track record. we build things to kill people. We don't spend money to feed people. And so I would think that they would be more concerned about us, because I think either you learn to live at peace with your neighbors or you get clobbered. If they're coming here, they didn't get clobbered. And we haven't learned to live at peace with our neighbors. I mean, look, India and Pakistan have talked about nuclear war, threatening each other, you know. We and the Soviets had hair triggers going, had airplanes with H-bombs flying at all times, ready to attack. The nuclear club has grown some, too. So, yes, I definitely think, given our state of affairs and the fact that we haven't been good stewards of our planet, I mean, look around the planet. What have we done? There is a chapter in the new book that says global warming is a bunch of nonsense, to put it sort of not gently. But we haven't taken good care of the planet. We haven't limited our population. You know, it's grown very, very rapidly. And we don't have the resources to feed it or to take care of the sick. And so, yeah, I think that aliens would be very concerned about what our plans are for the future. There's a book by a guy named Robert Hastings about nukes and UFOs. A clear indication that aliens are paying attention to our nuclear installations. Places where nuclear-tipped missiles, Malmstrom Air Force Base, for example, 10 of them were shut down with a saucer sitting up over the gate. I can understand they're being concerned. If I were an alien, I would be too.
We've got a few questions here in the chat already. One being, where do you think they've moved Area 51?
I don't think they did. There's still work going on in Area 51. There are other installations that are equally secret, including where, what's the name of the place, where they did the chemical war, Dugway Proving Grounds, which is out west as well. And some work probably went there. But Area 51's still there. Don't kid yourself. Remember, you got underground installations. And people say, why underground installations? We got good at building underground installations because when we signed the nuclear test agreements, no above-ground testing, we had to test underground. So we got good at building big holes underground where you could test a nuclear weapon and it wouldn't break through and pollute the atmosphere and so forth. So there are two reasons for having an underground installation. To hide from the spies in the sky, reconnaissance satellites, and in case somebody does drop a bomb on you, and there were serious worries about this up until a few years ago, you'd be a lot safer 2,000 feet down than you would on the surface, wouldn't you? So Area 51 is still there, and they have a right to operate classified facilities and test classified systems. That's where the stealth aircraft, but developed the SR-71. You know, there's plenty of good stuff going on there. One of the problems we have, and I have, when dealing with the academics, is that they have no idea how much research and development goes on outside of academia. You know, I did an interview for the Peter Jennings mockumentary, I call it that anyway, which was broadcast in February 24th, 2005. I was interviewed in Roswell at a nice museum there, not the UFO museum, but an art museum, and there are art museums in Roswell. And we got finished. It was an hour-long interview. They used 20 seconds of it and called me basically a salesman, promoter, that's the word, twice. But afterward, the guy says, Stan, don't you think if these things were real, that half the academic scientists would be working on them? And I said, absolutely not. Those who can do, those who can't teach. In other words, you want a stealth fighter, you go to Lockheed, you spend $10 billion in 10 years, and you get a stealth fighter. And in universities, it's publish or perish. On secret programs, you don't publish secret documents, limited distribution, and you're not paid to publish. If you don't publish, boy, you're not going to keep your job. That's a different world.
Now, Stanton, we have another question also from the chat. Someone had asked, are you, more worried about hostile aliens the more you delve deeper into your research, or are you less worried?
Am I more worried about what?
There being hostile aliens, or less worried in that regard?
I'm not really worried about hostile aliens. I haven't seen any sign of them doing to us what we do to each other. As a matter of fact, there's a book, Shoot Them Down, by Frank Ficino, Jr., about events in 1952 where our military pilots were given orders to shoot down UFOs if they don't land when instructed to do so. Now, how the heck you tell an alien to land your darn flying saucer or I'm going to shoot you down, I don't know. And there were several instances that I've heard about, 7 altogether, but just I have heard about, of pilots going up to chase UFOs and not coming back. So I think they returned the favor. So they seem to show far more restraint than we do. So I don't worry about them. Not much we can do about it anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, sorry, Steve, just quick hello. Someone from the chat had said quick hello to you, Stanton. WUFO News has said hi to you earlier on the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. The questions are surefire here. They're like lighting right up. And we have a call. So we'll get to the question first, and then we'll go to the call. The question is, does Stanton know anything about Bob Lazar's work at 54 near Area 51?
Oh, Bob Lazar. There's a piece on my website about him. I got asked a lot of questions about him because I am a legitimate nuclear physicist. I belong to the American Nuclear Society, American Physical Society, etc. Have a long resume and so forth. So people were asking me about Bob. This is way back 89, 90. And so I did a lot of checking, and I found that he doesn't have a degree from anywhere. I talked to 5 people at MIT, the registrar's office, the physics department, the legal counsel. Is it possible to wipe a guy's record clean? No, it isn't. I checked at California Institute of Technology. He was asked at Area 51, near Area 51, Rachel, Nevada, at the Little Ely Inn, can he give the names of any of his professors? And he said, let me think now. And he named somebody, Bill Duxler. He'll remember me from the Caltech physics department. Well, I located Bill Duxler. He never taught at Caltech. He was a physicist, did have a PhD. He taught at Pierce Junior College. And Pierce is the one school that acknowledged that Bob had gone there. And, when he asked what year, was asked at the same forum what year he got his degree from MIT, he said, let me see now, 1987, I guess. Anybody who goes to MIT knows what year he got his degree. I was accepted there. I couldn't afford to go a long time ago, but several of my friends could and did, and I'll guarantee you they would immediately know what year they got their degree. So Bob, he's in the phone book at Los Alamos, and it says right after his name, the initials for a consulting company. He didn't work for the lab, he worked at the lab. K/M, Kirk Meyer Company. And I checked that he worked at the, there's a long name, Clinton D. Anderson Mason Accelerator, a unique nuclear accelerator in the world. Sharp guy, bright guy. But he wasn't a physicist. His element 115 scheme won't work. A lot of people came at me. There was a big announcement that some atoms of element 115 had been created. 4 of them had to operate a big accelerator for more than half a month. And they got 4 atoms. You need 10 followed by 23, 24 zeros atoms to do anything with it. Also, they have a very short half-life. And Bob, at one time, had said that Los Alamos had 500 pounds of this stuff. Well, the half-life is less than a millisecond, less than a thousandth of a second. There isn't any way to collect 500 pounds of something with a half-life that short. And so Bob's a bright guy. He built a jet-powered car. I mean, he put a jet engine in a car. He puts on fireworks displays. He runs a company, United Nuclear, based in New Mexico now. But he was not a physicist, and I can't imagine him. He may have been at Area 51 because he was an expert at fixing radiation detectors. But that's not the same as working there to try to figure out how flying saucers work.
Okay, we have a call.
Thumbs down.
We have a call here. Hold on a sec here. Caller, you are live on Nocturnal Frequency Radio. I'm with Stanton Friedman.
Caller from the 509. Would that be me?
That would be you. Hello, Chad. How are you?
Great to hear you guys. Nocturnal Frequency, thanks for having this show. And Stanton, it's just an honor to be able to speak with you. I've heard you so many times, so it's great to get to speak with you. I am curious, though. You guys had mentioned about our visitors, and I would say they're obviously friendly, else we wouldn't be having this conversation. But they do seem to be more interested in something else here, more like resources. And given the current state of our resources being polluted at such an alarming rate, say, for instance, this oil leak, do you think there's any possibility that we may get some intervention, and soon, to stop whatever's been put in motion?
You know, it's a good question. I wish I could say, oh, yeah, they're nice guys. They're going to help us out. I see no indication of that at all. Keeping us from destroying ourselves, setting off lots of nuclear weapons is one thing. Helping us out of the problems we've created is quite another. Now, I should point out that I'm not saying they haven't been mining our resources themselves. We tend to forget.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with this. Are we now polluting it at such a rate that we're endangering their interests here, so they may step up on their own behalf, sort of thing? I'm just hoping, man. Just give me something. Give me something.
Yeah, I know. Let me point out something. 100 years ago, uranium was used to make a yellow glaze for pottery used for your dining room table. It wasn't used for nuclear weapons or nuclear power plants or any of those things. We didn't even discover the neutron until 1931, or 32, the deuteron first, then the neutron. So what is valuable to us now wasn't necessarily valuable to us back then. Also, the Earth happens to be the densest planet in the solar system. The average cubic foot of Earth weighs more than the average cubic foot of any other planet in the solar system. And the natural reaction might be, so who cares? Well, that means there's more heavy metals here, and heavy metals are relatively rare in the universe, high atomic number elements like uranium, or gold, or tungsten, or rhenium, or osmium, and these all have peculiar properties. And so they may have been mining them for a long time. Right now, rare earths, that's a whole group of elements in the periodic table, have very special properties, and the Chinese have garnered the market, and nobody really gave a darn about them 100 years ago. And now you can't build a Prius without using a bunch of them. So what I'm saying is they may be concerned for their activities, but I don't think they would have much pity on us Earthlings.
No, I have
It's almost like saying they're kind. Sorry to cut you off. It's almost like saying they're kind of indifferent then.
Say that again?
It's almost like saying that's kind of indifferent towards us, as far as they don't really care about us, more or less, more what they can get from this planet.
Well, how do you feel about microbes in the air?
they abduct people, and they may be interested in biological stuff all under the ocean. We have found, antibiotics in dirt from around the planet, and there's certain sea creatures that put out chemicals that are very potent and powerful. So they may be stealing goodies, and they do seem to abduct people and bring them back, which is a lot nicer than some of us Earthlings are to other Earthlings. And who knows what they're looking for. They may be graduate students doing their thesis work on the planet, the only planet in the neighborhood where people don't all speak the same language, where they don't all have the same color. It's a weird place. And, the reasons people travel are multiple. There isn't just one reason. When you go to O'Hare Airport in Chicago, there are people there for, 100 different reasons? At least. So who knows why aliens...
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
Chad, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I was just curious as if there was any hope of someone doing anything other than the people that are pulling the strings now, because I don't think they're doing such a great job. Just my opinion.
Well, thank you for calling in.
Hey, great show, guys. Thanks for being on.
Thanks. Take care. Stanton, out of all your research that you've done on Area 51, what exactly happened there? Obviously, we have so many different stories as what went down, the legitimate, the rumors. From your time investigating the case, what exactly went down?
Well, okay, you said Area 51. I don't know whether you meant Roswell or Area 51.
Roswell. Sorry.
Okay, I thought you might want that. Although there are a lot of people who say, hey, Stan, I'm going to Roswell. Area 51's right down the road, isn't it? No, about 600 miles away. I think at Roswell, in early July 1947, a saucer crashed. Why it crashed, we don't know. It may have been hit by lightning, might have been pilot error, there might have been a mid-air collision because there was another one found same time, over 100 miles away in the plains of San Augustine. And there have been other crashes too. But a saucer went down, military recovered it, a rancher had found wreckage, had gone into town 80 miles away. So the ranch was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's 10 miles from the nearest road. And I took some Japanese journalists out there and went around, and for 54 miles, we didn't see another person or another vehicle. And you can't do that in Japan. There's no place that you can drive that far without running into people and stuff. Anyway, he found this stuff probably Wednesday or Thursday. On Saturday the 5th, he went into the little town of Corona, which is where he normally did his shopping. It's much closer to the site than Roswell, but it was a small town, fewer than 1,000 people. Roswell was a big town at that time, 25,000. It's about roughly twice that now. And you can go to, it's got museums, and not only just UFO museums, but anyway, when he went into Corona, he hadn't heard anything about flying saucers. Well, this is a couple of weeks after Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting of 9 objects up in the Pacific Northwest, and we now have over 1,000 reports from all over the place that summer. And he hadn't heard about them. The ranch didn't have electricity. He didn't have a radio, didn't get a newspaper. But when he went into Corona, people were talking about the saucers. And he said, well, maybe that's what I found out on a ranch. He was concerned because his sheep wouldn't cross the debris field. This covered an area a few hundred yards wide and half mile or more long. Lots of pieces of strange lightweight material, nothing conventional. Anyway, when he went into Corona, they were telling him there was a reward being offered for pieces of one of these saucers, a few $1,000, which is a lot of money back then. And he ought to go into the sheriff in Roswell. And so he did on Sunday the 6th of July, bringing some of the stuff with him in his little truck. And the sheriff, by previous agreement, called the base. The Roswell Army Airfield just happened to be the home of the most elite military group in the world, the 509th. They had dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 2 more, that was in 45, 2 more in 46 at Operation Crossroads in the Pacific. Hand-picked officers, hand-picked men, high security. So the base, the sheriff called the base, talked to Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, and told him that there's a rancher here with this strange-looking stuff. And so Jesse checked it out, talked to his boss, Colonel Blanchard, who told him to take one of our counterintelligence corps guys with you and follow him out to the crash site. You see, there was no way to tell somebody how to get there, no GPS back then, 10 miles from the nearest road, and he was worried about somebody spying on them. That's why counterintelligence. You see, New Mexico had more classified activity going on per capita than any other state. I was mentioning this in England, and a British astronomer said, all there is sand, isn't there? And I said, well, no. 2 of the 3 nuclear weapon labs in the United States are in New Mexico. The first nuclear explosion was at Trinity site in New Mexico on the White Sands Missile Range, and that's where we were testing the captured German V-2s. The biggest employer in the state was Kirtland Air Force Base. I said, it's the only place in the world where you could study the 3 things that would tell you that soon the Earthlings would be leaving because of their developments: nuclear weapon explosion, V-2 rocket, and powerful radar, beginning the electronic revolution, if you will. There was no radar before the war, incidentally. And his response was, well, they could have gone to the Soviet Union. Sorry, they didn't test their first atomic bomb until 1949. So New Mexico was a peculiar place, and Colonel Blanchard was right to worry about spies. And as it turns out, we know there were spies at Los Alamos, as a matter of fact. Didn't know that until later, unfortunately. And so they followed the rancher out back to his place. And I talked to Jesse Marcel. I was the first one who had. And the rancher gave them a can of beans, and they slept in their sleeping bags. And the next day, took them out to the debris field. And Jesse told me, this is in 1978, that there wasn't anything conventional out there. He'd served in the Pacific. He'd seen airplane crashes. He figured it had to be a mid-air explosion because there was no crater. When an airplane goes in, boy, you can make a pretty big hole in the ground. And because the debris was spread out over such a wide area, it had to be an above-ground explosion. Anyway, they picked up a lot of the stuff that would fit in their vehicles, leaving most of it out there, went back to town. Jesse stopped at his house at night, woke his 11-year-old son, who is still around, has written a book, Jesse Jr. He just happens to be a medical doctor, a flight surgeon, and served as a colonel in Iraq. He was called back in at age 68, can you believe, and flew 225 combat hours in helicopters. He wasn't the oldest guy there. There was a psychiatrist who was a year older. So we have his story of handling the wreckage, seeing the strange symbols, and so forth. And he brought this stuff back. He stopped at home. The next morning he went into the base. Colonel Blanchard gives 2 orders, very important orders. One was to Jesse, get one of our B-29s to take you and this wreckage to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That was a standard place to take captured enemy equipment, try to figure out how it worked. Make a stop at our headquarters. 509th was part of the 8th Air Force. Their headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. If you look on a map from Roswell to Wright-Patterson, Fort Worth is right on the way. And the second order he gave is why we know about all this stuff. It was to the base public information officer, a guy named Walter Haupt, to put out a press release saying that we had finally recovered the wreckage of one of these saucers people had been seeing for the last couple of weeks. And that went out around noon New Mexico time, which was too late for all the East Coast papers, but not too late for the evening papers from Chicago West because of the time zones, of course. And so headlines, Chicago Daily News, Sacramento Bee, Los Angeles Herald Express, Spokane Chronicle, and a whole bunch more. And the way news was done back then, there was no CNN, and practically speaking, was no television. The story would grow all day long as newspapers and state radio stations would call the affected people and try to update the story. And so the base phone was ringing off the hook. And the story was, I'll say, killed, if you will. 4 hours after the story went out all over the place, General Roger Ramey, head of the 8th Air Force at Fort Worth, Texas, announced that it was just a radar reflector weather balloon combination. So that was the second explanation for Roswell. In 1995, I guess it was, 1994, they put out explanation 3, which it was a mogul balloon, which was a balloon train. There were 20 or 25 balloons to try to make a constant altitude system that would listen for noises from Soviet nuclear tests where they'd test one. And that's what had been found. And then they came up with explanation 4 in 1997, and that was these stories about bodies. Nah, there were no bodies. We, the Air Force, were dropping crash test dummies all over New Mexico. And they showed a map 3 times in their second report about Roswell. And the trouble is none were dropped anywhere near either of the 2 crash sites that I've mentioned. Furthermore, there was another little detail, a little difficulty with the crash test dummy explanation. Got past the New York Times, though. None were dropped until 1953, 6 years after Roswell. And I talked to the man who was in charge of the program. His pictures in the Second Air Force report. The dummies, for the test to be meaningful, had to be 6 feet tall and weigh 175 pounds. Now, how do you morph that down to a little guy 4 feet high with a big head and skinny little guy? Time travel, I know, that did it. They shrink when they're time travel. So
okay.
There are several books, and there's a lot of garbage out there about Roswell. And let me just mention one of the things. Why did all those people go running to you, Stan, to tell you about the crash saucer? They didn't. I happened to find Major Marcel because when I was at a television station in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I was promoting my lecture that night at LSU, Louisiana State University, and I was supposed to do 3 interviews at this station. Somebody from the university brought me over to the station. I did the first 2, and the third interviewer was nowhere to be found. Never have I been happier in retrospect that somebody was late for an appointment, because the station manager is, he can't find her, no cell phones back then, and he's giving me coffee, and he's looking at his watch and pacing in his office because he knows I got other things to do because he knows the people who brought me to the station. And out of the blue, he says, the guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel. Brilliant investigator that I am, I said, who's he? His next sentence really floored me. He handled wreckage from one of those saucers you were interested in when he was in the military. What? What do you know about him? He lives over in Houma, Louisiana. I didn't know where it was. I've been there since to talk to Jesse. He's a great guy. We're ham radio buddies and have been for many, many years. And Jesse never really told him anything about the crash, but he had seen the articles in the New Orleans Times-Picayune newspaper, statewide paper pretty much. And so that got me started. I shared the information with Bill Moore, whom I'd known earlier, and we had a second story up in Bemidji, Minnesota about a crash saucer in New Mexico, and Bill had an English actor who told somebody who wrote it up in the Flying Saucer Review in England that he had heard a story on the radio while driving across the country from L.A. to Philadelphia about a crashed saucer in New Mexico, and he could pin down the date. The other two, just he didn't have a precise date. And I knew there were loads of sightings in the summer of 47. Bill went to the University of Minnesota Library, started looking, early July, as the actor had said, and sure enough, there was the story. Verified what Major Marcel had told us and gave us the names of a whole bunch of other people, the base commander and Walter Hout, the guy who put out the press release, and General Roger Ramey's picture was in many newspaper articles and so forth. One of the people with them was then Colonel, later General Thomas Jefferson Dubose, and I managed to locate him, and Bill and I went to work. We found 62 people connected with the case before the first book was put out, the Roswell Incident in 1980. And that was before the Internet. You know, now you want to find somebody, www.411.com. But back then it was the hard way. You'd call information, find one person, and then ask if he knew of other people. And one of the lucky things, and I'll admit it was lucky, except luck is what happens when you're prepared, I called the Roswell Daily Record newspaper, and I said, I'd like to talk to the editor from 1947. This is 1978. I was long gone. What do you need? I said, well, I got an article from the newspapers that says the base public information officer, a guy named Walter Hout, it's spelled 4 different ways in the articles. And before I could finish the sentence, she says, his wife works here. What? You really don't expect the GI to be in the same small town where he was based in 1947 and 1978. I talked to Walter's wife, then I talked to him. He had a base yearbook. He was a founding member of the UFO Museum, a really great guy. He also was not just a public information guy. He flew more than 20 bombing missions over Japan during the war, dropped the instrument package over one of those atomic bombs that had been dropped in 1946. Great guy. His daughter runs the museum now. And for anybody who's down that part of the world, I strongly recommend going to the museum and finding out all about Roswell. And having some fun, too.
Okay, well, we'll take our halfway point break here. We'll continue when we come back. We have a few more questions from the chat room.
Okay.
Once again, if you want to know more about Stanton, visit his website at www.stantonfreeman.com, all lowercase. If you have a question you'd like to ask him and like to call us, you can do so at 914-803-4095, and we'll get you in there to ask Stanton the question. So hold tight, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rumbelow, and I'm director of a new kind of zombie film called Autumn. And you can read all about it at autumnthemovie.com. It stars Dexter Fletcher from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and Doom, Stardust, and all kinds of, and David Carradine from Kill Bill and Kung Fu, and Dickon Tolson from EastEnders. And I listen to Nocturnal Frequency Radio with Steve Janier.
Hello and welcome back to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, and tonight our very special guest, Stanton T. Friedman. Once again, if you would like to call in, you can do so at 914-803-4095 to ask Stanton a question. Once again, thank you for joining us tonight, Stanton.
You're very welcome.
We'll get your website out there one more time just in case. For those who are looking for more information about Stanton, go to www.stantonfreeman.com, all lowercase. To continue on with Roswell, I think we've got a few questions in chat there. Alex, you had a question there that somebody was asking earlier.
Yeah, that's right. WUFO News asked, what do you know about these plasma-type triangulating lights around the world?
Okay.
Triangulating lights?
Yes, I believe that's what it says.
Well, to triangulate is to take different measurements to try to find out the size of something. I think they mean probably craft with the triangular craft that seem to fly.
Yeah.
Well, there are reports of such craft from many different places, and the big question is whether they're ours or theirs. NIDS, a company that was quite active on the UFO investigating scene, did plot a lot of these and find that they seem to be between air bases, suggesting they might be ours. And there have been a number of reports of, I'll call them boomerang shape, triangular shape. And in the Hudson Valley, for example, there's some books about this. Lots of people, hundreds or sometimes thousands actually altogether, spotted these triangular shapes, and large and silent and slow. People get excited about high-speed craft, but it's just as exciting when you see a big craft moving at, say, 20 miles an hour. We don't have any airplanes that can, big airplanes that can zip along at 20 miles an hour, and silently. And so I don't know what they are. Some of these may very well be alien. Certainly the Phoenix Lights, the term boomerang is usually used, which is triangular, and it was almost a mile wide, and flew very slowly. Took 4 minutes to cross over an area where somebody was looking up and saw it coming and went over and saw it leaving. And I don't think that was ours. And it certainly wasn't I love how the flare explanation, an hour and a half later, some Air Force Reserve planes dropped some battlefield flares. These aren't the kind of flares you put behind your car when you're stuck on the road. These will illuminate, a big chunk of the battlefield. They come down in parachutes. And some of those were dropped, not in the same area, and they're clearly flares, and yet whenever the news media talked about Phoenix Lights, they'd show pictures of these flares, which were not the Phoenix Lights. So they're unknowns, whether they're ours or not. The stealth fighter tends to be somewhat triangular. As the F-17, 117. So if they're out there, what they are, I don't know. I can't claim they're alien necessarily.
We have another question. I guess going back to Roswell, the question would be, how would you characterize Major Marcel as a witness?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing you have to say is he had good ratings from his superior officers, and to be the intelligence officer for the most elite military group in the world tells you a great deal about him, really. And I have talked to people who knew him at the time and who spoke very well of him. I was very favorably impressed. Some people have hurled lots of insults at him. And as a matter of fact, if you look at his son's book, The Roswell Legacy, he talks about the fact that the son was getting sick and tired of people lying about his father. Now, he was not West Point, but he had good ratings, and one of the things he would do, the B-29s at Roswell would fly pseudo missions, if you will. There'd be a target selected a long distance away, and they'd have to get out there to, take a certain amount of time to get there, see how accurate they could be in their navigation, and so forth. And one of his jobs as the intelligence officer for the base was to brief these guys. And I talked to people that he briefed, and they were very favorably impressed about how thorough he was, what a good job he did, stuff like that. I couldn't find anybody who said anything bad about him as a person. a southern, he's from Louisiana, actually, as you might judge from his name, Marcel. And when I saw him, he was living in Houma, Louisiana, and he had lived there before the war. But no, excellent witness. And remember, he handled pieces. We're not talking about some dim light in the sky, vaguely seen from a long distance for a short period of time. He was in a field with lots of pieces of this stuff. He never saw an intact saucer, but he did pick up pieces. He handled them. He examined the pieces. Part of his job, if there was a crash, was to, help figure out what the heck was going on here. So I'd rate him an A+ witness. He wasn't the guy who was washing the dishes in the kitchen. I washed dishes when I was in college. So I'm not knocking people who wash dishes. What I'm saying, in terms of the kind of accuracy you expect from them, he was a number one.
Another question. If you could create a ufology research team with endless funding, who would you want on your team and why?
Well, the funny thing, if you're talking about a mobile team ready to race to the site of a sighting, you'd want guys who can evaluate film. You'd want guys who can get witness testimony. Cops, detectives are often very good at that, better than your typical scientist, as a matter of fact. People forget that scientists are accustomed to dealing with things, not with things that are involve intelligence. You set up an experiment, you control all the variables, you rerun the experiment, you publish your data, and so forth. That's nice, but this is much closer to what do you do in the case of an automobile accident, where it's after the fact, where you might measure skid marks, you might check on the brakes, you might check on the alcohol level in the driver, what the weather conditions were, all this kind of after the fact. And that's much closer to a criminal investigation than to a typical scientific experiment, where you control the variables. I mean, you study earthquakes, you wait for them to happen, and you look at the readout on your seismographs, but for an investigation, you need people who are good with people, who can draw out of them the details without putting words in their mouth. One of the problems you sometimes find with a newspaper account, for example, it turns out the reporter would ask the witness, well, how big was it? I don't know. Well, was it as big as a Volkswagen? Yeah, I suppose. How far away was it? Well, there was no way to know. Half a mile? Well, it could have been. How high? And we go through this whole routine, and the newspaper article says, witness says a Volkswagen-sized UFO seen half a mile away, 300 feet up. And the scientist said, well, you can't judge those things. Of course not. You're looking at interpretations rather than observations. And so I'd want people, if there was a physical trace case, for example, and you'll often hear the noisy negativists saying there's no physical evidence. Well, we got lots of pieces. That doesn't mean you and I have them. Just like I don't have an atomic bomb in my basement. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but I don't have access to them. Would want access to them, but anyway. The physical trace cases, and Ted Phillips in Missouri has collected over 3,000 of these, where people see an object on or near the ground, and after it leaves, one finds the equivalent of burn circles, burn rings, landing gear marks, and 1/6 of the cases involve reports of beings associated with the craft. So you need somebody who can do soil testing, recover samples without contaminating them. Again, it's more like a crime scene situation. But what you really also want, and something I spent a lot of time on, is somebody who can look at the documents that we have to see whether they're legitimate or not. The Majestic 12 documents, my book, Top Secret Magic, talks a lot about these. And where you look at what's on the paper and see, can you verify any of the data? And it's kind of funny. One of the documents, Philip Klass, who wrote 4 anti-UFO books, challenged me on one of the documents. Perhaps I hadn't noticed that it was done in the large pica type, but the National Security Council used elite type because I got 9 documents to prove that. He didn't tell you there's 250,000 pages of NSC materials at the Eisenhower Library, to which he had never been. And he challenged me to find any other documents with the same size and style type. And to sweeten the pot, he offered me $100 each for every such genuine document, up to a maximum of 10, unfortunately. And to make a long story short, I provided 14 and an invoice for $1,000, and he paid me. So you got to be careful about who do you have looking at these things. Also, there are radar sightings, multiple witness radar visual cases, and you need somebody who can analyze radar records when you can get them. The Stephenville, Texas case a couple of years back. It turned out after the Air Force said, we didn't have any fighters flying, people said they had seen F-16s. Oh, no, not us, said the Air Force. And then 10 days later, oh, you know what? There were 10 of them flying.
Yeah,
and so we managed to get the radar records from the FAA, and there were sort of a lot of instances of strange flight behavior, going along at speed and stopping. You know, any airplanes that can stop? They weren't helicopters either. And so there's all kinds of skills that need to be involved. And also, how do you get the people who know something to speak out? When I check my audiences after my lectures, I ask how many people here believe they've seen what I would consider to be a flying saucer, having defined my terms earlier. And the hands go up hesitantly when I first start, and I point and count, 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time I get to the other side of the room, the hands go up quickly. Each one had thought he was the only one. Typically, it's 10%. That's a lot of sightings. But then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. So if we could bring out that 90%, in other words, and get all the military cases where the guys can't talk because of national security, I'd love to see a blanket freeing from security limitations, let's say for all sightings more than 50 years old. That seems fair enough. Certainly technology has changed a lot in 50 years. You haven't seen that done so far. I like the military cases because usually there's more than one witness. Usually or often you have observational aids, that is radar, binoculars. A guy in a control tower usually has binoculars to check on airplanes going by, and I'd love to get those military cases, but they're hard to dig out. Well, one of the guys, at the end of my lecture, when I go through this routine, there's still people who have reported, I'll say, how many of you were in the military at the time? There's still a few hands. I'll ask you want to tell us about it. And a typical example, 2 typical ones. One guy in front of 1,300 people says, I can't, they told me not to say anything, which was a great line. And then the other one says, they took my pictures. A dead silence. So I said, look, you don't need to stand up. I'm not asking your name, but I'm sure the audience would like to hear the rest of the story. Everybody claps. Okay. He remained seated and told us that he had been flying a 4-engine aircraft, Air Force plane. He was a pilot. Out over the Pacific, daytime, 20 miles ahead, there was another plane, radioed back, saucer heading their way. They had gun cameras. They took pictures. They radioed the base to which they were going, because the crew doesn't handle the film. That's an intelligence function. Some people seem to think they're going to take the film to the drugstore. It doesn't work that way. They landed, the film was taken, and they were debriefed and told never to say anything. Now, how do you dig out all these cases? It isn't easy. So, also, you need a gutsy politician. A man named Art Campbell out of Oregon has published, it's almost published, a book about a probable meeting between President Eisenhower and aliens at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And he's found witnesses to the president's plane being there when he was supposedly in Georgia playing golf. It's a long story. So how do we find out about meetings between government officials and aliens? How much work has the government done on abduction cases? We don't know. We do know that they lie a lot. There's an article on my website about government UFO lies. They should be held accountable, it seems to me. So it's a complicated issue. And, the noisy negativists want, well, why don't you show me a piece of a saucer? If the government's got pieces, it sure isn't showing them. And people say, why not? Because every country on the planet would love to be able to build something with the flying characteristics of saucers. People say, when are you going to have disclosure? Aren't we entitled to know everything? No, we're not. I worked under security for 14 years. There is a national security element here. How do the things work? And let's face it, the government spends a ton of money trying to figure out better working flying craft. And ones with the maneuverability of these things would be, to say the least, desirable. And I certainly don't want that data out on the table where Osama bin Laden can get at it. He's got the money. So you need a wide variety of technology. It would be an easier problem if you had access to the pieces, to the data, to the radar stuff. I mentioned Bill Moore before. Bill once filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Air Defense Command for all reports of uncorrelated targets. See, they don't call them UFOs. It's not a UFO. It's an uncorrelated target. That all such reports within a few-month period. And he got a straight-faced letter back saying, thank you for your request. As you know, there are fees for searches of this sort. Please send your certified check for, it was like $110,318, something like that. And I've often dreamed about, what if somebody had sent them a check? What would they have done? And, I get people telling me governments can't keep secrets. Well, I got 160 pages of National Security Agency UFO data by their designation, in which you can read one sentence per page. Everything else is whited out. I got a bunch of CIA documents that are all blacked out, except several pages have 8 words on them that you can read.
Jeez.
And so if you could get access to data, that would help. People say governments can't keep secrets. I mean, look, the Corona spy satellite, the first successful one, and there were 12 failures before that, all in secret, got more data about Soviet military installations than all the U-2 flights that had preceded it. It was successful in 1960. There was not one public word about Corona until 1995. And believe me, the technology had greatly improved between 1960 and 1995. The stealth plane was developed, $10 billion in secret over a 10-year period. Governments can keep secrets. It's easy. Need to know and have the right clearances. I mean, again, the academics seem to think, I had one guy tell me, if a saucer had crashed, there would have been an article in the Physical Review, that's where we physicists normally publish, within 3 months. And I said, you've got to be kidding. The first nuclear chain reaction, Stag Field in Chicago, an earth-shaking event. There was no article in a scientific journal. It was classified. You know, the first, it sounds funny, but the first supersonic flight, Chuck Yeager, 1947, September, wasn't revealed, wasn't released information about it for a long time after that. So secrets can be kept. And you need guys with security clearances who want to say, look, as Colonel Dubose said to me, he was 87 at the time, Stan, if I remember anything more, I'll tell you, what can they do to me now? So anybody listening, go to my website. It's got my addresses. I mean, it tells you how to buy all my books, too, sure. And incidentally, they're all available through Amazon. But if you buy them from my address, they're autographed. And the books by Kathleen Martin and I, they're autographed by both of us. And you won't get that from Amazon.com.
Absolutely. I just want to remind everybody you're listening to Nocturnal Frequency Radio, and tonight we have our special guest, Stanton T. Friedman. You can visit his website at www.stantonfreeman.com, all lowercase. Once again, if you have a question for Stanton and like to call, you can do so at 914-803-4095. And once again, if you're in chat, in our live chat, you can ask a question there, and we do have a couple questions coming up here for you, Stanton. It's nonstop. You're definitely in high demand, that's for sure. Alex, go ahead. You have a question there for him.
Yes, actually, we have a question from Chris Hawley. She's in the chat, and she's curious to know whether you think there are aliens living among us, or living and or walking among us today.
Interesting question, because while in general it's tempting to say that the aliens are sufficiently different that you'd recognize they weren't from here, any place except New York, maybe, where who knows what you see there. But, on the other hand, when you look at all the genetic stuff, I mean, they seem to take sperm and ova, stuff like that. And there is considerable discussion about hybridization that is creating a being out of part earthling and part alien. There's another problem, too, and another reason for doing that. I remember Travis Walton, he's got a book out, Fire in the Sky. He'll be speaking in Roswell, too, incidentally. He described when he wakes up on a table, there's a bunch of little guys around him. They're typical alien, big head little guy. He is, to say the least, shocked. He's a big guy, and he grabs something there and threatens these guys, and they move away. He goes into the other room, and there's another guy there. He said it would pass on the street, and he was taller than Travis. Travis is tall. And so you have to recognize that if you're going to spy in China, for example, you don't send a tall, blonde Norwegian. He sticks out like a sore thumb. So hybridization would serve the purpose of being able to put people down here, in our society, just as the Russians taught people English who came to spy in the United States, didn't they? They had a whole school for spies, American slang and having to learn all about the place so you could pass for a local. What better way is there of getting information? So I don't know. I can't show you somebody and say, here's an alien from Zeta Reticuli. I'm not saying that at all. I don't know. But it makes sense if you can manipulate genetics. And remember, if I would have used those words 60 years ago, you say, what are you talking about? DNA hadn't been discovered yet. We tend to forget that. And artificial insemination and all the other stuff that we do, embryo implantation, these are new concepts comparatively. So somebody else may have been doing that for a long time, and I can't rule that out. And I can see good reasons why you'd want to do that. I wish I could introduce you to one.
You know what? Just to continue on with that a little bit there, we do have one more question, but I just want to ask you, the whole hybrid scenario. Now, obviously, one of the major forms of research and event unfolding in the UFO community environment, or however you want to look at it, and that's being cattle mutilation, and now more so coming out human mutilation. What are your thoughts about that whole scenario, and why is this happening, and what's the end result? Like, obviously, we see the end result on our end, but what's their end result?
Well, I don't know. It's one of the peculiar things. I mean, there have been plenty of mutilations, including big buffalo. And I can't imagine anybody getting close. If you stood next to him, I have a 2,000-pound buffalo. You ain't going to mess with that guy. So Maybe it's to analyze certain parts of the body to, get pollution, if you will, or other things about the planet. I don't know what's going on. There are very few cases in which people see the saucer and the mutilated animal at the same time. You find the animal in a place where there are no tracks leading up to it. A couple of cases where the body seems to have been dropped, if you will. How do you pick up a cow? If you got him 50 feet above the ground and drop him, boy, he's going to be in pretty sad shape. So there are a couple of cases, but not many. I don't know what's going on. And trying to determine motivation is very difficult because, professors of psychology at universities sometimes pull a stunt. They'll have somebody come in suddenly into a classroom, shout something, wave a gun maybe, and dash out. And the test is to see, what did the kids see? What did the students see? And, it wasn't that there was a guy there who was threatening anybody. It was the professor trying to show the students that there's a big variation in how people respond to certain stimuli. So we don't know why people do lots of things. There are plenty of murders in which we don't know why was that done. Was it an act of passion? Was it somebody going crazy? The whole bunch of possibilities. So I don't have answers to all the questions. And look, there have only been about a dozen PhD theses done about UFOs. My book, Top Secret Magic, lists a bunch of these. There's a 10-page bibliography, too, for that matter. There's room for plenty more effort. I'd love to see somebody do a study on the will not to believe, the unwillingness, especially of people like astronomers, to look at the evidence. The SETI people, they'll say there is no evidence, and I never find references to the 5 large-scale scientific studies that I talk about in my lectures. If you're going to say there is no evidence, you should have spent some time looking. I did a debate with Dr. Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute on Coast to Coast Radio. We had met on the Queen Elizabeth II. We were each giving 3 lectures. We were cordial and courteous. But in the course of my lecture, I asked, after each of the 5 studies that I talk about, how many people had read it. He hadn't read any of them. We did a debate on Coast to Coast Radio, and he still hadn't read any. Now, he's admitted recently that he has a copy of my book, Flying Saucers and Science, on his night table. He didn't say he'd read it. We get people making all kinds of claims, very well-educated people. I mean, that's the point of the new book, Science Was Wrong. Only 2 chapters about UFOs, one about abductions and one about the overall UFO problem. But there are many, many examples of smart people saying stupid things. Space travel is utter bilge, said the British royal astronomer 1 year before Sputnik. The great astronomer of the 19th century, a man named Simon Newcomb, was so important that when he died, the funeral was attended by the President of the United States. But 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight, he made a strong statement that he couldn't imagine that man would ever fly with a self-contained vehicle. They might use a balloon. 2 months. He didn't know anything about flight. And so we tend to accept testimony from well-educated people as if it were based on their use of their intelligence and knowledge to do a solid study of the problem at hand. And we had a good example of this quite recently when Stephen Hawking, one of the world's great astrophysicists, no question about him. I have the greatest admiration. He's got a handicap, the Gehrig disease, and he manages extremely well. But his comment about we shouldn't try to attract the attention of the aliens because they may be marauders like Columbus, and look what happened to the natives and stuff like that, obviously knows nothing at all about the overwhelming evidence that the planet's being visited. I mean, you're going to talk about aliens, let's look at the evidence, the radar visual cases, the large-scale scientific studies, multiple witness cases, etc. And there were people who were responding to Stephen who were saying, look, if aliens were any place close by, they would have communicated with us. In the first place, we don't know that they haven't. But in the second place, why? They're going to send us a signal using technology that matches ours. You know, Columbus sent smoke signals to the natives, of course, before he headed west. What an utterly ridiculous notion. And they say, well, they can't be closer than hundreds of light years away. Within 55 light years, there's almost 2,000 stars. Now, if I'd said 70 years ago, and plenty of them had planets, I'd have been laughed out of town. There aren't any other stars with planets as far as we knew. Now everywhere we look, because we got better techniques, we found over 450 planets around those stars, and the Kepler satellite out there will be sending home heaps of data. They got a moratorium on release of that data for a year, which I don't like. Planets all over the place. So what I'm saying is we get people who are bright people acting as though, well, there's a syndrome. I keep track of what's important in the world. If aliens were visiting, that would be important. But if it were important, I would know about it, and I don't, so they must not be, and I'm not going to waste my time on this silly subject. Circular reasoning. Of course, you have to admit, if aliens are visiting the planet, and they're not talking to the SETI people, what do you need SETI for? Maybe you should learn sign language. You know, radio signals.
Yeah.
We've had radio for roughly 110 years. What if somebody has had systems for communicating over long distances for a mere 1,000 years, or 10,000, or 1,000,000 years? We're the ultimate? I mean, that's really ridiculous. And, you know, why do astronomers consider themselves experts on how people behave and how intelligent beings would behave? I mean, you might go to a psychiatrist or a lawyer or a social worker, but astronomers? Since when is study of things that aren't natural, meaning thinking beings, what's that got to do with astronomy? Nobody interferes with a star doing its thing, you know, or a supernova doing its thing. It's nature. But if you're talking about controlled vehicles, that's another story entirely. And so, you know, it's a strange world we live in.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Alex, go ahead. You have another question there.
Yes, I do. What's your thoughts, Stanton, on interdimensional travel? I mean, because I know that theory is floating around where we're getting visitors from other planets via interdimensional travel.
You know, one of the things that we're stuck with here is, again, as I mentioned earlier, that the people who are coming up with these theories, multi-universes, you know, and string theory and all these things, are stuck. They can't figure out how you could do it without that, so we got to dredge up some science fiction kind of technique. I don't think you need interdimensional travel. It may be there, but why worry about that? The question is whether they're here, not whether you know how they got here. The natives in New Guinea during World War II developed a cargo cult because they saw these crazy things flying in the sky and occasionally crashing. And they built things that looked like those because they had no idea what is this technology. So, you know, we don't know what slide rules are. We don't know what a lot of things are. And I'm mystified by the world of the iPod and the pad and a bazillion other little things that, I mean, isn't that crazy? You're saying that a guy can touch the glass on this little thing he's holding in his hand and things happen? That's impossible. Must be he's controlling your mind. You know, we don't need interdimensional. We have mind control to make you think that's what's happening. But, you know, how much of our modern technology would be comprehensible to somebody 100 years ago? So it's easy to say, well, let's conjure up some other explanation instead of saying we're behind on the technological measuring scale. So maybe it's there, but I don't waste much time on it. I'd rather deal with something you can deal with, like documents or physical trace cases or radar visual sightings.
We have another question. What are your thoughts behind the whole 2012 scenario? Because obviously there's a lot of hype. Obviously now with Hollywood dipping into the pond, and there's all sorts of theories from an enlightenment to total destruction, end of the world. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, the Mayans may have run out of paper. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I will say this, and there is a chapter in the Science Was Wrong, which deals with how important things that we didn't want to take into account, changes in the energy output of the sun, for example. We used to say the sun was constant. We talked about the solar constant. It emits energy at the same rate all the time. It turns out that isn't true. We've got a lot of good measurements lately, and we've just put up a really good satellite, SDO, solar something or other satellite. And we're finding that the sun isn't constant in its energy output. We're finding that magnetic fields are very important in the solar system, although 60 years ago there were people saying, it's only gravity. What do you mean magnetic fields? There's no magnetic field effect in the solar system. Well, there's plasma all over the place. And there's more, we talk about the Van Allen belts here. Jupiter puts out far more particulate radiation than the Van Allen belts. Of course, it's a lot bigger, not surprising. So we don't know much about periodicity on the planet. We know that the poles have moved. We don't know why. We know that there's a cyclicity, if you will, ups and downs in the energy output of the sun, in the effect on the Earth, and the solar electromagnetic effects. With this new satellite, we can sort of see into the sun for some distance. And boy, there's a lot going on there. The steadiness of the sun doesn't exist anymore. So what I'm saying is the Mayans may have had knowledge of other things that are going on that will come to a head, so to speak, in 2012. We used to think everything was constant. And then we realized that maybe the dinosaurs were done in by something sudden that happened, like an asteroid, for example. There may be other things going on that are triggered by changes in the sun, changes in the cosmic rays. There's a study done on tree ring growth, this is mentioned in the book, which showed that it correlates not with temperature, but with the galactic cosmic rays, with the ups and downs. It's a periodic phenomena and stuff. So we don't know all there is to know, even though each generation thinks it does. The next generation shows that it was full of baloney. It doesn't. We learn something new all the time. And one of my, a mantra, if you will, is that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The laser's 50 years old this year, totally out of keeping with what we knew 75 years ago, let's say. And yet the laser and the guys who invented it did not think in terms of your checkout counter or your CD player or, anything like that. It's a remarkable tool, remarkable things. And we only found out about it, but somebody else could have had, the equivalent of lasers 1,000 or 1,000,000 years ago. So unless you admit ignorance, it's hard to learn something about something new. You look at something that doesn't fit and you say, well, I must have made a mistake. Fortunately, who was it, Fleming, who discovered penicillin? He discovered a little petri dish in which the bacteria had apparently, for some reason or other, been killed They weren't there anymore. They were in other ones. But he followed it up. He says, what's going on here? He didn't say, oh, I must have made a mistake. And he discovered penicillin. So I try to put a notion here that be very careful about saying it's impossible, because almost everything in our modern world was thought to be impossible not too long ago. As a matter of fact, Billy Mitchell, he's a favorite character of mine. He flew airplanes during World War I, and afterward came out with outlandish notions that this was changing warfare forever, and he talked about sinking ships with airplanes. The Secretary of the Navy said, this guy's gone nuts. I'll stand on any ship he says is going to sink with a bomb dropped from an airplane. What are you talking about? Well, fast forward to that was in the early 20s. 1941, November 29th. Army-Navy game, big football game, and in the program was a picture of the USS Arizona, this huge battleship. And the caption was, nobody has ever sunk a battleship with a bomb dropped from an airplane. 8 days later, Pearl Harbor was attacked, and the Arizona was sunk by bombs dropped from an airplane. 1,100 men died because it's impossible. Couldn't be. Can't be. Well, sorry. These guys have been wrong before, and they'll be wrong again. So, be cautious about what's impossible.
Yes. We've only got a few minutes left here. Did you want to get into your latest book?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of fond of it because only 2 chapters are about UFOs, as I said. But one is about aviation. Kathleen and I each did 7. She did more of the medical stuff, and I did sort of the technology things. But Kathleen Martin is Betty Hill's niece, and she's the co-author on Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. Trained in social work. The story of the hemophilia Holocaust, strange title. When AIDS was just getting to be known, most hemophiliacs depended on transfusions of blood products. And there was concern about maybe the AIDS virus, which hadn't yet been isolated, would contaminate the blood. And there were doctors who said, continue your treatment. The chance of getting this virus through a blood transfusion is 1 in a million. 10,000 American hemophiliacs were made HIV positive as a result of transfusions of bad blood. 10,000. Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, love that name, in 1840 or so was at a big lying-in hospital in Vienna and figured out that the reason that women whose babies were going to be delivered by residents and doctors as opposed to midwives, the midwife population there, the women, only 2% came down with childbed fever, which was invariably fatal. The ones handled by the doctors and residents, it was 20%. And he figured out that it was because they weren't washing their hands. The mark of a good doctor was how bloody his apron was, and they'd come down from doing autopsies, handling organs and stuff from people who died, and then going down and delivering babies. And he instituted strict cleanup procedures, and he cut the percentage down from 20% to 2% also. The head of the hospital was very upset by his setting up these draconian measures, insisting that hands be washed thoroughly, et cetera, et cetera. And he was forced out of the hospital. And they continued with their old procedures for years and years. There were people who were totally against vaccinations to stop smallpox. That was God's way of controlling the population. Literally thousands of people died because they didn't get vaccinated when they could have been. In other words, these are preventable problems. I get a kick out of the resistance to space travel. one of my favorites, Dr. Campbell, another astronomer. This is Anti-Astronomer Week here. He proved in 1941 that this crazy notion that you could send a man to the moon and back, he calculated the weight of a rocket that would be required to do that. It would have to weigh 1 million tons. And less than 30 years later, we got 3 guys to the moon and back, still with a dumb old chemical rocket, whose initial launch weight was 3,000 tons. He was off by a factor of 300 million. He made all the wrong assumptions about how you would go about it. And it's truly incredible. There had already been work published which would have told him, if he had bothered to look at it, that the assumptions he'd made were stupid. And I don't often use that term, but in this case, they're deserved. He assumed a single-stage rocket, a limit of 1g acceleration, launched straight up, that the rocket has to provide all the energy. I'm sure most people know that on our deep space probes, we use cosmic freeloading. You know, a free kick from Jupiter when we go by to go out to the outer planets. When we go to the moon, we use the moon's gravitational field. That's why we have a launch window. You get there at the right time, and the moon, you don't need to provide the energy, it provides the rest of it to get you there. So there are a number of different chapters, each dealing with one of these areas, quoting the people, exploring. I mean, I've got a whole book of bad claims made by smart people, but it just lists them. You know, quotes you a few sentences, doesn't explain anything. The point is that there are ramifications from these pronouncements from on high of impossibility. And right now, the attacks on UFOs, on telepathy, on all kinds of paranormal phenomena, there are people who seem to be able to diagnose the ills of somebody without opening them up, you know, without running tests and stuff. And that sounds crazy. But the fact is that it happens. So we want to use it. And that's one of the crazy things. Back in the 20s, it was discovered that you could cure pernicious anemia. They made dogs anemic and then fed them different foods. It turns out liver did the job. They tried it on people, and it worked. It was many years before they found out it was vitamin B12, because we're talking minuscule amounts. But the smart doctor says, look, I don't know what's in this stuff, but it works. Let's use it. Let's save lives. That's what we're here to do. Instead of, well, that can't be. I don't know anything. I mean, the British were using limes. That's why the sailors were called limey, you know. Vitamin C wasn't discovered until long after they were feeding sailors lime juice. So it's important that we recognize that expert advice is often not expert.
We've only got a couple minutes left here. Now, what is the title of the new book? Sorry.
Science was wrong! Exclamation point. There should be.
and you can get it at Amazon, but you can also get it on your website.
Oh, you can get it at Barnes and Noble, and you know, all the big bookstores, Borders and stuff. But if you get it from my website, use PayPal, for example. All the books I send out are autographed. And even though there are 2 authors, we have little book plates. So we don't send the books back and forth. And you get both authors' autographs. And it turns out I never really appreciated how important it is to some people to get autographed copies. And I always autograph everything I send out. So.
And people can. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say they can send a check, and in that case for $19.95, that includes priority mail to me at Post Office Box 958, Holton, beautiful downtown Holton, Houlton, Maine, 04730-0958. And if you go to the website, it lists all the books and the prices, and you know, you can send a check or use PayPal, or there's a lot of different ways of doing it. And there's some bargains if you buy 3 books or 4 books. You won't get those at Amazon.
And the website is www.stantonfreeman.com, all lowercase. Stan, it has been a complete honor, and I very much enjoyed having you on the show. And you know what? There's just so much to just pick your brain with. We'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Well, after summer vacation, why not? For you, not for me.
Yes, definitely. We would certainly love to have you back on. Until then, please take care, and thank you so much for coming on tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Take care. Amazing guest. You know what? We could have went on for another couple hours or so. He is just so full of tons of knowledge on pretty much anything, obviously, in the realm of ufology, but so much more. We'll definitely have to have Stanton back on the show. There's no doubt about that, Alex.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's like you said, a wealth of knowledge, and he's been doing this for a long time. And he's also very humble. He doesn't go out and preach what a lot of people have preached in the past that make you wonder whether they're legitimate or not.
Yeah. Incredible. And Chris, sorry that you had one question left there. Maybe when we have him back on the show, we'll have him answer that question. Please, if you come back on, remind us what the question was. Until then, thank you very much for everybody who tuned into the show tonight. This is the finale, Alex. I completely forgot. Jesus Murphy. But we do have a rescheduled show with our friend Jason Day, which will be June 13th, which was supposed to be last Saturday, but we have rescheduled to June 13th. That'll be our last scheduled show for the summer, although this was our official season finale, and we will be back September 19th, I believe, which is a Wednesday night. We will be live Wednesday nights now from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time till 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Alex, we have to talk. I have some news for you that I won't break to the listeners quite yet because we got to work on the details, but we will talk. Until then, guys, thank you for tuning in tonight. It was certainly great this evening. Bonus show with Stanton Freeman, and yes, we look forward to having him back on. Take care, everybody, and have a great summer.
Have a good night.
International Travel.